is June the 15th, and the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, in short UNHCR, is taking part in the events organized by the Mairie de Paris to mark World Refugee Day. This is an anniversary, all right, but it can hardly be called a celebration. As many as 60 million people, almost the population of France, come under the mandate and need the protection of UNHCR today. Around the world, governments are proving increasingly reluctant to let asylum seekers in, and when they do come in, equally reluctant to allow them to stay. The Global Compact for Migration, sometimes dubbed in French Le Pacte de Marrakech or the Marrakesh Covenant, may be a soft law instrument, but ever since it was adopted, it has caused fury among some segments of society in many countries. One of the accusations levied against it being that it will cause a mass influx of refugees. Yet from the New York Declaration on Refugees and Migrants, from which the Global Compact stems, another Global Compact was born, just as essential as it provides a brand new legal instrument to deal with a global emergency, the Global Compact on Refugees. And due to all the hysteria around the Global Compact for Migration, the Global Compact on Refugees has been all but overlooked. That makes no sense. The emergency is here, clear and present. Recently, the mindless care displayed by some governments, particularly in the Mediterranean, where scores of migrants and refugees continue to sail from Libya to Europe, as well as the closed border policy induced by that scare, had a UNHCR spokesperson in Italy, Ms. Carlotta Sami, make this statement, and I quote, "If we do not intervene soon, there will be a sea of blood." What would you like this year's edition of World Refugee Day to get national governments, especially in the Mediterranean area, to understand of the mistakes of their conduct and the dangers refugees are facing, both as a result of that conduct and before they decide to flee? And what are the expectations of UNHCR this year toward national governments when it comes to the Global Compact on Refugees?
Thank you. Yes, we are very happy to mark the World Refugee Day, but we know that global displacement is increasing. In a few days we'll publish the Global Trends Report, where we speak about the new numbers of refugees, but the number of children, women and men that are forced to flee their countries is increasing all the time. And thank you for mentioning the Global Compact on Refugees, because this gives us hope, because it was met with a lot of consensus and is based on the need to share responsibility and to show solidarity with the countries that are most affected by refugees. Most refugees are actually in developing countries, not in industrialized countries. But coming to your question about the Mediterranean, we are very, very worried about the situation, because the number of people who are dead or who are missing is increasing every day, and capacities actually to rescue people are decreasing at this time, including the work of NGOs that played a very important role in saving lives. Is affected by all sorts of controls and measures. And there is also a discourse about refugees which is against refugees and against foreigners that is worrying us. What do we ask on this day? I think what we ask is really more solidarity and responsibility. We have an important occasion with the Global Forum on Refugees that will take place in December in Geneva, where states will be able to pledge contributions and to share good practices about refugees, because these exist. What we need is really to honor the commitment to save lives. This is an obligation that is foreseen by international law, and also a system which is predictable to disembark people who are saved their life, saved at sea. And this doesn't exist yet at the European level. So we, as UNHCR, together with other agencies, with IOM, we made concrete proposals about a system, a regional system, so that people can be saved and can be distributed within Europe based on solidarity. But we are not yet there, because the system nowadays, and we have a boat now at large, is a case-by-case approach, a boat-by-boat approach, which doesn't work and is untenable, as my colleague in Italy was mentioning.
Well then, As a non-governmental organization, the Association of World Citizens, in short the AWC, finds inspiration in the opening words of the Charter of the United Nations with the peoples of the United Nations. In this spirit, we strive to make everyone understand that even though the UN is made up of nation states, it is primarily the citizens' right and duty to make sure that the goals and principles of the UN are respected and translated into action. Yet today, increasingly often, exerting that right and living up to that duty seems to be regarded by governments as a crime. Here in France, a number of people, including an Amnesty International activist who lives near the border of Italy, have been brought to justice solely for helping migrants, that is, without asking them whether they were just migrants or they intended to apply for asylum, but that truly makes no difference. In Italy, a new law imposes a heavy fine on whoever helps an undocumented foreigner enter the country. In the USA, several people have been prosecuted for bringing humanitarian aid to migrants along the southern border, the border with Mexico. One of them, Scott Warren, just walked, as the jury could not decide whether that was an offense or not. Sounds like a joke, but it's true. In this day and age, just give a bottle of water to a migrant, and you may just end up in the slammer. Well, how does UNHCR view these prosecutions of activists who are just bringing aid to people in need? And what are your recommendations to those governments who pass laws against helping migrants, whether concerning the treatment of migrants proper or the criminalization of activists coming to the rescue?
Well, as much as refugees should not be penalized for seeking protection in a country of asylum, also those genuinely helping refugees and asylum seekers should not be sanctioned, should not be penalized. The role of NGOs, of volunteers, is key in the reception of asylum seekers, especially in the first stage after their arrival. So the duty of hospitality is really something very important that we honor and that should not lead to sanction. And actually it's very close to the principle of fraternité among people and with the people who had to leave their countries, were forced to leave behind their homes because of war and persecution. Going back to the Mediterranean situation that you mentioned, nobody should be penalized for saving lives. This is actually an obligation foreseen by international maritime law. When somebody is in distress at sea, there is a duty to save lives, apart from the moral obligation to save lives. And also for those who are saved, there is another important obligation, which is not to return them to places that are not safe. This is the principle of non-refoulement. In this moment, UNHCR has repeated, for instance, that Libya is not a safe place for disembarkation of refugees. Not only the conditions in the detention centers in Libya are terrible, but now there are also fresh fighting, and UNHCR, with the help of resettlement countries, is trying to evacuate people from the centers to other centers and from Libya itself to have access to protection and solutions. So those who save lives at sea actually comply with two duties: rescuing lives and not returning people to unsafe places.
Well then, for several years, especially since 2015 and the first mass arrivals of refugees on the shores of Europe, the AWC has stressed that migration has to become a priority for everyone, and that feeling of ours seems to be shared by international institutions. In September 2016, the International Organization for Migration, until then a self-standing institution, formally became a member of the UN family, in which UNHCR has always been prominent. More than ever, international civil society, obviously including the AWC, stands on dangerous ground. We support the efforts of agencies such as UNHCR, but conversely, we need their help if we are to continue bringing our support. Just remember what the late Tony Benn, the former British minister, used to say: the way a government treats refugees is very instructive, because it shows you how they would treat the rest of us if they thought they could get away with it. If we are all here today as representatives of the UN, civil society, Paris local government or the French government, It has to be because we all recognize the need to come to the rescue and recognize the rights of refugees. Well, therefore, how do you think it is possible for UNHCR and civil society groups, including but not limited to the AWC, to join forces in some form of track 2 or track 3 diplomacy, to have local and national authorities to come to a greater form of acceptance and ultimately of protection of refugees?
Yes, first of all, thank you for this beautiful quote by Tony Benn, because I think it's so relevant nowadays. Everything is done or not done for refugees actually is reflected in what we can do ourselves and how far we can advance in terms of our societies. So thank you for that. We were mentioning the Global Compact on refugees because that document is really recognizing the role of the whole society in protecting and in assisting refugees. So it's not only a matter of states, but a matter of all actors, including the municipalities. We are here today, for instance, in Paris, including the work of associations and volunteers. So this work is really core, and we should all work together in terms of advancing the situation of refugees with the participation also of refugees. You mentioned IOM, an agency with whom we work very, very closely because there are refugees and migrants that move on within mixed flows, and it's important to make joint proposals to make sure that those who are in need of protection are protected, but that everybody can have their lives saved and can be assisted with dignity. So it's really a matter for everybody to advance, to make steps together to help the refugees. And associations like yours are fully, I think, entitled to collaborate and to be proactive on behalf of migrants and refugees. And UNHCR, as you know, works very closely with NGOs and also in the context of global consultations. But in each country, it is the NGOs, it is the volunteers who are the first ones to help the refugees every day, and we would like to thank them for their efforts and to be reassured about our full determination to work with all the actors of the society.
Thank you, Mr. Artini.
Thank you.